Hello, hello. Today we are starting our conversation on square roots. Okay. So the image that I have up on the screen here is this. I linked this in Google Classroom. It's basically a list of all the perfect squares and why they are what they are. So before we kind of talk about this, I want to go over some of the parts. So let's just look at the very first one. So you may or may not remember all this. You've probably heard these words before, but just in case. So this symbol right here, this symbol is called, it actually has a couple names. You can call it a radical. You can say root one, that's another way to say that, or you can call it a square root. Okay, so that symbol right there, so you can see on all of these, this is, typically we call it a square root symbol. Okay, but you can also, it is sometimes referred to as radical. So let me just do this. Okay, so this thing is a square root or radical. Okay, there are other types of roots besides square roots. There are cube roots, fourth roots, fifth roots. You can take any kind of root you want. And so we're only going to be focusing on square roots. So I'll leave the conversation about the higher roots for your next teacher. Or you can, I don't know, we can have a Zoom session, just do it for fun. So anyway, so what even are they? Let's focus on this line right here, the square root of 9, and that's how you would read that out loud. So if I'm going to say that out loud, I'm going to say the square root of 9 is 3 because 3 squared equals 9. So think about that. If I take 3 and I square it, right? Remember what that means. That means to do 3 times 3. I'm going to get 9. So what we do is we actually are going to call these numbers over here, and all of these numbers that you see coming out over here and keeps going down the whole page, these are what we refer to as perfect squares. Okay, perfect squares. That's an important word to know. Perfect squares. And the reason why they're perfect is because if I take their square root, I get a nice number out, right? So if I take 9 and I ask for its square root, like I do right here, the answer is 3, because I'm asking myself, what do I multiply by itself to get 9? So if I multiply two numbers together, yeah, it's true that 1 times 9 is 9, but I want two numbers that are the same that get me 9. So it's 3 times 3. So therefore, the square root of 9 is 3, okay? So it works the same way down here. If I ask you for the square root of 16, that's just going to be 4 because it's 4 times 4 that gets you 16. Okay, so the perfect squares are a very special set of numbers. So actually, if I zoom out a little bit, we can see, yeah. So here's all of them from 1 to 225 is the biggest one we have on this list. Okay, so again, this whole column here, all of these numbers here, oh, it's the same on the side. I thought that kept going. I guess it's probably just meant to print it and cut it in half. But anyway, so those are all the perfect squares up through 15 squared. Obviously, it keeps going. 16 squared, 17 squared, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But that would be a massively large list. So here we have 1 through 15 squared gets you these perfect squares. Okay, and these are numbers that you kind of want to familiarize yourself with. You don't have to memorize this or anything, but it's helpful as you're doing work in this unit. When you see 49, I would love for a bell to go off in your head and say, oh, wait, that's a perfect square, right? So if you saw the number, I don't know, 55, 55 is not on this list, doesn't really mean that much to me, okay? But these numbers are important because they are perfect squares. All right, so Hope that makes a little bit of sense. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the work for today. Give me a second to pull that up. In the meantime, I hope everybody's doing all right. Okay, here we go. Perfect squares. Here we are. Okay, so your assignment today looks like this. So all I need you to do is to tell me what the square root of each of these numbers is. So if you have that list right in front of you, some of these are going to be really, really fast. Or some of these you probably already know in your head. Like number 1, the square root of 36 is just 6. Right? That's it. Now, some of you might be out there thinking, but Mrs. Sabia, I thought that I heard that the square root of 36 is positive 6 and negative 6. You are correct. If you take negative 6 and you square it, so if I do negative 6 times negative 6, I still get 36, don't I? I absolutely do. So 36 actually does have 2 square roots. It's positive 6 and negative 6. Okay, so here's the difference. If I just, it kind of comes down to notation. If I write square root of 36 just like that, this has no symbols in front of it. So this is what we call the principal root. And that's when you're just going to give me the positive value. If I want both of them, you're going to see a symbol like that in front of it. So that symbol, that plus minus symbol out in front, indicates, hey, I want both of these roots here. So you would have to answer both positive and negative 6. If I wanted just the negative root, it would look like that. They'd just have a negative out in front, and this answer would just be negative 6. Okay, so on this whole sheet, they're really only concerned with the principal root. So you can just give me the positive value for all of these. That's totally fine. When we get into solving equations, we are going to be worrying about both roots, okay? But for now, you can go ahead and just give me the principal root. So really quick, I mean, you can look on your chart, but if you know these are going to be super fast. So I do want to jump down. Oops, I always do that because they're not all quite this easy. You'll see, oh, real quick, let's talk about number 6. Square root of 0, what do you think that is? What times what gets me 0 where both of those numbers are the same thing? I'm wondering if you came up with that. And if you did, you are correct. The square root of 0 is 0. It's not undefined or broken or something weird. The square root of 0 really is 0 because 0 times 0 is 0. Okay? So there's that one. And then I do want to jump down to these ones at the bottom that are fractions. I know you might be looking at this like, oh my goodness, is she nuts? I'm not dealing with a square root and a fraction. It's actually super, super easy once you know how to deal with it. So, turns out when you take the square root of a fraction, you're really just taking the square root of the top number and the square root of the bottom number separately. That's it. So as long as the top and bottom are perfect squares, it's actually really not that bad. So to get my final answer, the square root of 1 is just 1, right? And the square root of 121, you can look on that chart or you might know it, it's just 11. That's it. That wasn't so bad. Now, if you look at 15, you might notice something a little bit different about 15. This in here, 36 over 100, you could reduce that fraction. So you can reduce it right now. I actually might not though. I might just do the square root as it is. So I'm just going to do square root of 36 over the square root of 100. Okay, and you'll see why in a minute, why I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to reduce it yet. So the square root of 36 is just 6, and the square root of 100 is just 10. So now, yes, I do need to simplify this fraction, 6/10, but that's a lot easier to deal with than 36 hundredths, in my opinion. So my numbers are much smaller, so I do have to reduce somewhere. It doesn't matter if you reduce the original or after you take the square roots, but you do have to do it. So if I reduce 6/10, that's going to come down to be 3/5, and there's my final answer. Okay, so the same thing is going to happen with 17. You can choose to reduce it first if you want, but I think that that's much harder. So I would just go ahead, take the square root of 36, take the square root of 144, and then simplify your answer afterwards if it needs to be done. Okay, so I hope this helps. I know some of you have probably seen these square roots before, but if not, this should only take you a few minutes, especially if you have that chart in front of you. You can get this one done super fast. All right, talk to you soon.